Well, hi, and welcome back to Beyondswatches. My name is Tiffany. I am the knitter over here that just shares her knitting journey. I have plenty of things going on the needles at any given time, but I love the chaos of it all. My primary focus is finding patterns that are fitting and flattering to a plus size body because I am one. And so I'm just really trying to navigate understanding how to make a pattern work for me in the little ways that mean, that cater to my personal preference. So yes, we can make a thing bigger. Yes, it can fit a large range of sizes, but does that necessarily mean it's looking good on me, or is it just, a burlap sack? So that's what I'm doing here. And if that's your type of thing, then yes, stick around, press the subscribe button. I hear recently we got to turn on notifications. Some of you may not be getting the notification. Like the video, comment on the video, share the video with friends, those who would find some interest in what's going on here. And then also another big component of what I'm trying to do here is find yarn that doesn't break the bank, but also gives a really good end result. Anyway, so today we're just talking. I'm going to talk about a question that I get not all the time, but I've received it quite a few times. We're going to answer the question about how to identify the weight of a yarn, but more specifically, I think what you are asking is probably, how do I know if that yarn works for this project, or, that type of thing. So we're going to look at some yarn labels, and, maybe I can find a free pattern that we can use as a reference, and then we'll just kind of go from there. So, and of course, again, just a disclaimer, and you already know this, I am not a professional. I'm not a professional knitter. I'm not a professional teacher. I'm not an instructor professionally, but I do teach and guide is what I like to call it. When I, have people that come in and say, I want to learn how to knit, I can show you how to do it. So I do have classes and things that I charge for, but for the most part, I'm just here with whatever questions you have. You got questions? I'll try my best to answer them. And then because I do cater to beginners, that's who my focus is on. So I try really hard to break things down in a way that you understand them when you leave and you don't feel completely overwhelmed. So for this particular thing, because this will be some information that I feel you can use anywhere you go, whether it's in the store, online, I want you to grab a notebook. I want you to get a pen. You can take a note in your phone if you like, but I suspect you're watching me on your phone. So, and let's take some good old-fashioned high school, college notes and start to learn what these weights mean. And then we'll go over the label so that you can be a little bit more equipped with the information that the label is telling you. And hopefully at the end of this whole thing, I haven't confused both of us. So let's go ahead and get started. So first things first, I'm going to pull up from the Craft Yarn Council, which is the authority on this type of thing. I'm pulling up their website, Craft Yarn Council. When you go to their website, you can save this, so write that down, craftyarncouncil.com. It'll be over here. That's why I left some space. Go to their website and you're going to click on the button that says, at the top, it says standards. And what you'll be looking for is the standard yarn weight system. So I'm going to put up the picture of what I'm looking at right now so that you can see what I see. And we'll go through what each column means. So first thing we're going to notice, which you will see on majority of yarn bands, is the number. So I just pulled out some yarn so we can look at it. Do you see that says number 1, right? In that little ball band? The standard yarn weights go from 0, which would be a lace weight, all the way up to a jumbo, which would be like that pink fuzzy yarn that I was working on, and that purple yarn, those are jumbo size. So everything in between 0 to 7 are the categories of weights of yarn. Within each category, there are other terms or names that you might hear. So 0 we call lace weight, or they have it listed as the 10 count crochet thread. So you see that. Under number 1 would be considered sock weight, fingering weight, baby. Number 2 is sport weight or baby weight as well. Number 3, you'll see more common in the big box stores. So Walmart's, Joann, Michael's, Hobby Lobby, they lean a little towards the 3, but they mostly carry 4. So 3s would be the DK weight, or what is also called light worsted. Number 4 would be the medium weight, called worsted, Afghan, or Aran. 5 is bulky, chunky, craft yarn, or rug yarn. Super bulky is the number 6. And then there's number 7, which is the jumbo yarn or the roving. So I have a couple of things here. I'll show you what they look like. So this would be a 0, which is the lace weight. And you see how thin that is, right? So here's the lace weight. That's 0. Here would be that category 1. And that would be considered a fingering weight. And so what do you notice between the two? It just got a little thicker, right? The spin on the yarn is a little bit thicker, so you can kind of see like, okay, this is super, super thin. This would be considered a lace weight for sure. This one is a little thicker, but still kind of thin. This would be a number 1. So that's the 0 to the 1. Then we have the number 2. Number 2, we said, is called sport weight. So here's a comparison between the 1 and the 2. They look almost the same. So it's just very, very small difference between the two, right? That's the 1 and the 2. So now we get from the 2 to the 3. This would be oops, get out of there. All right, so that's the number 3. And that's what that strand looks like. So that's the difference between the 2 to the 3. Right? But let's, for fun, look at the difference between the lace weight and the 3. See the difference now? Like, it's hard to tell going from one number to the next, but you see what a 0 looks like and what a 3 looks like. So if you have yarn in your stash and you say, I want to take this beautiful lace weight yarn, and they have a pattern that says to use DK weight, if you put these two together, you know, if you knit this the way that the pattern calls for, it's not going to look like the pattern because the weights of yarn are completely different. Are there ways that you can circumvent that? Absolutely, but we're not going to talk about that right now. So that's the number 3. Then we have the ever so popular number 4, which was that worsted weight. Oops, number first. Where's the number? There we go. She's a little raggedy. She was beat up in the back of the closet. And that's the difference between the 3 to the 4. See that? Okay. And the 4 is the more common. I tell you, you'll probably see more 4 weight yarns because they are made in acrylic yarns as well. Most of these companies that make acrylics, they make them usually in a number 4. And that is because if you remember on the symbol, the number 4 is also considered Afghan weight. So a lot of blankets will be made in that yarn. A lot of sweaters are made in that yarn. Oops, sorry. Hey, I got a new microphone. Did you notice? Do I sound different? Because, whatever. Anyway, I'm trying here. I'm trying to, amplify. But anyway. So then we have the number 5. This is, oops, got to show you the number. That's the number 5. And this is what the 5 compared to the 4 looks like. Big difference now, right? You see that. Much thicker. And again, for fun, let's take a look at the size 1 compared to the size 5. See that? Very thin to very thick. So if you wanted to sub out, let's say a 3 for 5, also very, very big difference. But just also realize you can do what you want to do. You can make the pattern according to the way it's written and get a different result that you still love. So it's absolutely okay. That's why I said these are the guidelines, but it's not a hard and fast rule. You can do whatever you want to do. It's your yarn, your preference. Next up is going to be that number 6, which is the super bulky. And then the number 7 yarn would be that big, fluffy yarn that you've seen already a million times. So those are all of the categories of yarn. So now we're going to go back to the chart. On the chart, it tells you that the gauge, knit gauge, for a 0 weight yarn, so just the 0, most, if not all, swatches, which would be the gauge swatch that you always see in a pattern, you should have this amount of stitches per 4 inches and this amount of rows per 4 inches. So when you make that swatch, the Craft Yarn Council says the standard for the yarn to get to that dimension is going to be knitted at 33 to 40 stitches per 4 inches. So the knit gauge on the lace weight specifically, you see it has those 2 little asterisks up there, asterisks. If you go down to the guideline only, it tells you that lace weight yarns are usually knitted or crocheted on larger needles in order to create the lacy open work patterns. So it's hard to figure out what your gauge is on 0 because it's so thin and your needles would be so big that they're saying it's hard to tell. All right, on to the number 1. Number 1 is telling you within that 4 inches, you should have 27 to 32 stitches. Number 2 says 23 to 26 stitches. Number 3 yarn, 21 to 24. Number 4 yarn, 16 to 20. Number 5, 12 to 15. Number 6, 7 to 11. Number 7, 6 or less. So we'll skip down to the recommended needle size for each category of yarn. So for the lace weight yarns, you're going to probably be using a size 000, which is ridiculously tiny. It's really small. Up to a size 1, which is also really, really tiny. If you're using a fingering weight yarn, you're going to use or recommended to use a size 1, US 1 to a US 3. Size 2 yarns, needle size 3 to 5, etc., etc. So you see the chart. So what happens if you decide to change the needle and you don't want to use that needle size for that yarn? It's the only thing that changes is the final result. So if I have this thick yarn and it's recommended to use on a super bulky yarn, it's recommended to use a size 11 to a size 17. Well, if you decide to drop down to a size 8, 1, it's going to be really tight because this yarn is big compared to the needle size, but you'll have a very, very dense fabric, which if that's what you want, that's perfectly fine. If you were making something like a rug, you don't want any gaps or holes in between the rug, you want it to be tight, that would be a good reason for you to drop down in a needle size. If you were using, let's say the pattern called for a size 3 yarn, and the size 3 yarn recommendation says to use a size 5 to 7, but you had a size 9, then all that will change is that your stitches are going to be bigger or have more space in between the fabric. So like this, I think this was knit on size 6. And so, oh, see my microphone, I'm not used to that. So the stitches would knit on a 6. It's not dense, but it's not too loose either. But if I went up a needle size, then it would become a little wider and it would drape a little bit more because it has more air and more space in between the stitches. If you put it on something smaller, then it becomes very, very tight, stiff, unmovable, like it's a denser fabric. That's what that would be. So it really is your preference. You're just going to go based off of what the pattern says first. But if you freestyle on it, you do what you want to do. You make your swatch, you knit it up on, whatever needles and yarn combination you have, and see what you get. If you like it, continue. If you don't like it, change. That's all. I wanted to show you also this same information on here is, again, the council's recommendation and guidelines. But the manufacturers and the companies that make this yarn, they have information on theirs as well that will give you a better idea of how this yarn performs and how it might fit your pattern. So on the number 3 yarn, the first thing you'll see if you look at it, it's going to be, you have your knitting needle symbol and you have your crochet hook symbol. So when you're looking at a ball of yarn, look for the craft that you're doing. This is going to be your knitting needle. It tells me that I'll be using either, or the recommended needle for this ball of yarn would be a US 5 to a US 7. And that you should get 5 to 6 stitches per how many inches? 1. So the Craft Yarn Council does the measuring by 4 inches, but what did the yarn say on the ball? So the ball is telling you what you need to know. If you're gonna knit, they recommend a size 5, US 5, a US 6, or a US 7, and you should be getting 5 to 6 stitches, 5.5 to 6 stitches per 1 inch. That's what that means. Then it tells you the name of the type of material. It's 100% recycled acrylic, this thing is. It does tell you that it's machine washable and you can tumble dry on low. That's what a yarn label would look like if you went to the store. So let's look at another one. This is the bulky number 5. Bulky number 5. You see those swatches there in the middle? These little boxes right here? So the one with the knitting needles, they tell you this should be worked up on a US 13. So you see a US 13 right here. It tells you that in a 4x4 swatch, you should have 10 stitches across 12 rows. I'm reading it backwards, so 10 stitches across 12 rows, and that would give you a 4x4 square. So when you're looking at your label in the store, and so I don't know if my phone is about to die, this microphone is about to die, but it just cut off, so I don't know where I was. I think the last thing I remember saying was the swatch label on this thing. So I know I got through that part. So when you finish with this and you're in the store, oh, that's what I was getting ready to do. Pull up a free pattern so we can look at what the gauge says compared to the yarn that you have at home, and how you can kind of look at the pattern to determine whether the yarn you have might potentially work. So why I like the Tin Can Knits pattern so much is because they give you a lot to choose from. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that up right now. We'll put it right here. So On this flax sweater, which is very popular free pattern by Tin Can Knits, they tell you that you can use a sock weight yarn, which we've learned is a category 2. You can use a DK weight yarn, which is a category number 3, or you can use a worsted / Aran yarn, which is a category number 4. So if you are using a DK weight yarn, where's my label? That would be my number 3, right? Where's my label? There it goes. Sorry. That's the number 3. This DK weight yarn tells me that I should have, on the pattern, it says the gauge is 22 stitches per 4 inches. So when I look at this gauge, I get 6 stitches equals 1 inch on a size 5 to 7 needles. So 5.5 to 6 inches per 1 inch is what the yarn label says. So if I'm just going to take this yarn and apply it to this pattern, I'm going to say, all right, well, if I'm using a size 6 needle like this recommends, I should be getting either a 6 or 5.5 stitches per 1 inch. 5, 10, 15, 20 would give me 20. If it's 6 times 4, then I have 24 stitches in a 4-inch square. Does that make sense? So this gauge ball, this ball band is telling me that they're only giving you the 1-inch measurement. So if the pattern is telling me it's 4 inches, then I have to take what's on this and make it into 4, like multiply it by 4. So 1 inch gives me 6 stitches. Times 4 is 24 stitches, which according to this pattern, the sock weight yarn is getting 24 stitches on a size 5. So we go back to the ball band. On this ball band, it tells me I can use the size 5 through a 7, and I'll get that 5.5 to 6 stitches per inch. So if I drop the needle and I went on a size 5, like this pattern recommended, according to the ball band, I will probably be getting the same 22-ish stitches on a smaller needle. And so why you'll want to make a swatch for yourself, and this is where I will insert the fact that I very rarely gauge for, I want to make sure that I get the exact same numbers, but here I have a little bit of gray area and wiggle room. I want to know how this yarn will look on a size 5 compared to a size 6. And I also want to know if it's going to be too big, which would be the size 6, or too tight, which would be on a size 5. And then you would figure out whether or not you like the fabric of either one after you wash it and dry it or what have you. So that is what the ball band and what the weights mean. I'm pretty sure you'll have some follow-up questions. So whatever they are, stick them down in the comment section, and I will try to follow up with probably a newsletter out to everyone. So if you're not on the newsletter list, go to the website and sign up, and I will put a FAQ together if I need to. If this helped and you kind of got it, watch it a few times. Did you take notes? Because I told you to take notes. And the reason why I said take notes, I'm a visual person. So I need to tactile write it down, read it, and then I can understand it. But if you just need to keep rewatching, you do that too. So those were some of the things that I felt like might be helpful, especially when yarn bands tell you so many different things. Like, well, they don't tell you so many different things, but they put them in a way that may not always be the same. For example, not all ball bands carry the number symbol. Some just say fine. They'll say medium. They'll say sport weight. They'll say light fingering. It'll say all kinds of things. So having that yarn chart symbol thing either committed to memory or on a little photo in your phone will be helpful when you're ordering yarn and you're trying to figure out what weight of yarn is this. Also on that chart, it will be helpful to kind of see if they don't tell you what, like Pearl Soho, for example, I think they're doing it now where they kind of put the weight of yarn on it, but they used to just give you how many stitches per inch you get with their yarn. So I would mosey my way over to my chart and I would say, all right, well, if they're getting X amount of stitches on this needle, this is probably a sport weight. And that's how you'd have to figure it out, because sometimes they don't tell you because, you know, they make their own yarn, they spin their own yarn or whatever it is that they do. So it may not be exactly the same, but they still have to meet a certain metric according to the standard, if that makes sense. So you can figure it out. It just takes a little bit of work, but it's really helpful when everything is on the label, just like that, right? So you got your knitting swatch. What does that one say? Knitting swatch on this one says US 8 needle, 18 stitches, 24 rows. And that would be for a 4-inch swatch. And it's a category 4, also called a medium. And so when you get in your patterns, you can look in your stash and say, how much of this do I have? And make it work from there. So you got questions, you're still confused, let me know. Send me an email if you want. I can respond back to you that way too. It doesn't really matter to me. I just want to help you understand it. I don't want you to be so overwhelmed by the yarn, because that's the fun part. The yarn is the fun part. So let's keep it fun and keep it light. Let me know if you have any other questions. It is a dark and dreary day. It's so overcast here, so I apologize for the weird lighting. I'll try to fix it in the filters, but that will do it for me today. I will share project updates later. Just as an FYI, I finished the shawl, that big bright pink one. I finished that. And then I'm still working on my daughter's blue sweater. I actually put it to the side because I was so close to finishing the shawl. I was like, let me finish the shawl and I'll get back to the sweater. So next week will be all sweaters. I'll be working on the 3 sweaters that I have, and that'll do it for today. So shrimp tacos are going to be for dinner, and blueberry muffins are for dessert because that's what my husband asked for. And for breakfast, it's just me and him today because both the girls are at work. We had Belgian waffles, scrambled eggs, and bacon, and coffee. There's always coffee. So we will see you in the next one. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, turn on your notifications so you don't miss when the next upload is. And also share with a friend so we can help grow the community and help me get to my 4,000 watch hours so I can become part of this monetized world on YouTube. And as always, my link tree is below. So if you want to go shopping, you can help support me by shopping with the links, but you can also save yourself some money because there's always a sale. So check for sales. Let me know what you buy, if anything. So unfortunately, the camera died right as I was closing. So thank you for watching. I always appreciate you, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.